When I was a kid, I thought life worked like one of those road maps they used to hand out at gas stations. You started at one point, followed a line, and ended up somewhere better. But somewhere between flunking out of community college and fighting with my old man, my map turned into scribbles. I left home at 21. My dad and I had it out after he called me a quitter, and I wasn't about to sit through another lecture. My mom tried to smooth things over, but I slammed the door before she could. I haven't been back since. Then there was Lydia. She wanted me to stick to school, get a degree, find a real job. I wanted that too, I think. But when the bills piled up and I kept switching part-time shifts at diners and warehouses, she started losing faith. We argued all the time. Money, schedules, my lack of direction. She was patient longer than I deserved, but I gave her plenty of reasons to snap. One night after one of those fights, I did something I shouldn't have. I drank too much, went to a party with a buddy, and cheated. It was quick, ugly, and pointless. By the next morning, I hated myself for it. Only 3 people knew. The girl I cheated with, my buddy who covered for me, and me. That secret gnawed at me, but I buried it under long hours and bitter coffee. By fall of 2019, the only steady thing in my life was the graveyard shift at Hollow Creek Gas Mart, a half-forgotten station off Route 30 in northern Oregon. It wasn't glamorous, but the paycheck cleared, and the night gave me space to breathe. Working nights had its rhythm. A trucker or two around midnight, silence until 3. Then a couple of drunks looking for cigarettes or bad coffee. The hum of the freezers and the buzzing fluorescent lights became my soundtrack. Sometimes I'd scroll my phone until my eyes burned. Other times I'd just listen to the cold tick of the clock on the wall. I told myself the solitude was good for me, but the truth is it just kept me from facing how far off track I'd gone. And then came January 17th. The night when the hum of the coolers wasn't enough to drown out what waited outside. At 2:04 a.m. I saw him. Pump 3. Tall guy, faded leather jacket, hood pulled up. He wasn't buying gas, just pacing. Cigarette after cigarette, smoke curling white under the harsh lights. For 10 minutes he stood there, flicking ashes onto the pavement, glancing at the glass doors like he was waiting for me. I leaned forward, muttered, "Either buy something or move on." But he didn't move on. He lifted his head, and I swear I saw his lips shape 3 words through the glass. "I know what you did." My stomach flipped. My hands turned cold. Nobody should have known. Nobody. I told myself it was the caffeine, the lack of sleep. But when he flicked his cigarette to the ground and walked off, the knot in my chest didn't loosen. It only grew tighter. I tried to shake it off. I'd had drifters hang around before. Usually they were just high or needed a place to warm up. But my nerves stayed shot. Then my phone buzzed at 2:11 a.m. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but my gut told me to look. It was a photo. Of me. Grainy, black and white. I was standing right where I was, behind the counter. Same shirt. Same night. Same second. Like someone had just taken it through the glass. I whipped my head toward the door. Nothing. The lot was empty, except for a faint trail of smoke drifting by Pump 3. I checked the doors. Still locked. The aisles. Empty. The restroom. Empty. Yet the smell of smoke lingered inside, like someone had exhaled near me a moment ago. My phone buzzed again at 2:37. Another text. "Confess or she'll know everything." My heart nearly stopped. My thumb shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. I thought about calling Lydia, telling her before anyone else could. But what would I even say? That some chain-smoking phantom was blackmailing me? She'd hang up and never answer again. So I sat there, watching the monitors. Every flicker of light made me jump. Every tick of the clock sounded like a gunshot. The man never came back that night. When dawn broke and the day clerk came in, I stepped outside for air. Pump 3 was littered with half-burnt cigarettes. Dozens of them. But when I bent down to pick one up, my stomach dropped. The filters weren't crushed. They weren't bitten. They weren't even singed. They were perfect. Clean. And yet the smoke drifted in the air, curling across my face. The lot was empty. By the time I got home that morning, I was wired. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that hooded face mouthing the words. At first, I thought maybe it was a prank. My buddy Tyler, maybe, who knew about the cheating. He had a messed up sense of humor, so I called him. "Man, what the hell would I get out of standing in the cold at 2 a.m. just to freak you out?" he said. "You've been watching too many horror flicks." "Then how the hell did they get that picture of me?" I snapped. He swore up and down it wasn't him, told me to lay off the caffeine and get some sleep. But I couldn't. When Lydia came over that night, she noticed right away something was off. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. "What's going on?" I lied. Told her it was just work stress, that the night shift was getting to me. She didn't buy it. "Jake, I know when you're hiding something, just don't shut me out." Her words cut deeper than she realized. If she knew the truth, she'd walk out and never look back. Back at the gas station that night, I kept checking the monitors, waiting for the man to return. He didn't. But every creak of the cooler, every flicker of the neon made my skin crawl. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, just one word. Soon. The following week, the man came back. Same pump, same leather jacket, same endless cigarettes. This time, I didn't wait. I stormed out of the booth, heart racing, fists clenched. "What the hell do you want?" I shouted across the lot. He didn't answer, just stared. The smoke around him seemed thicker, like fog rolling off his body. "You think this is funny?" I barked. "You want to ruin my life? Go ahead. Tell her." He took one long drag, lifted his hand, and pointed at me. Slowly, like a judge passing sentence. I bolted back inside, locked the door. My phone buzzed. "You'll tell her, or I will." That broke me. I sat on the floor of the booth, shaking. I couldn't eat, couldn't breathe. The store around me felt like a cage, and the man outside was the executioner. I knew then I had no choice. The next evening, I met Lydia at her apartment. My stomach felt like it was full of knives. "I need to tell you something," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "What is it?" And I told her. Every word. The fight, the party, the cheating, the shame, the guilt. She cried. She screamed. She told me to get out, and I did. I sat in my car afterward, shaking, staring at my phone. No messages, no smoke. No man at Pump 3. The next night at work, Pump 3 was empty. The lot was quiet. No cigarettes, no ghost. It hit me then. The man, the messages, the smoke. It was all my guilt made real. My conscience waiting in the dark until I confessed. I didn't get Lydia back. Some things don't heal, but the man never returned. Secrets rot in silence. The longer you hide them, the more they grow, twisting into shadows that follow you everywhere. Guilt has a way of haunting louder than any ghost, and the only way to end it is to tell the truth. Confession doesn't always save what you love, but it saves you from being trapped by your own lies. I never thought this would be my life. Not once, when I was 19 and playing guitar in bars across Nashville, did I imagine I'd end up in a roadside diner outside Memphis, Tennessee, pouring coffee for truckers and half-drunk college kids at 3 a.m. Back then, I believed I was going to make it big. I had the drive, the songs, the voice. At least that's what I told myself. But life, as I've learned, doesn't give a damn about your plans. When gigs dried up and bills piled higher than tips, I put the guitar away and took the first job I could land. A diner isn't glamorous, but it's steady. My wife Claire, she was 8 months pregnant when I signed on. I told myself I was being responsible, stepping up, trading dreams for diapers. We moved into a cramped 2-bedroom with peeling paint and paper-thin walls, but it was ours. Most nights, I don't mind the routine. Truckers order the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, toast. Students cram for exams, spreading out books and scribbling notes while inhaling pancakes. Even the drunks stumbling in from late bars are predictable. I can handle them. But there's one customer who unsettled me from the first time he walked through the door. He always came around 2:30 a.m., wearing a torn gray hoodie with the hood up, face shadowed. He never ordered more than black coffee. Didn't talk much, didn't tip, just sat in the far corner booth, staring too long before slipping out into the night. At first, I wrote him off as just another night owl. But the staring, it wasn't casual. It was the kind of look that makes your skin crawl, like he knew something about me that I didn't want to admit. Then came the envelope. I found it on a Wednesday night after he left, sitting right where his coffee cup had been. My name was scrawled in block letters across the front. Inside were photos, grainy, but clear enough. Photos of me outside the diner, smoking with Jolene, one of the waitresses. Photos of us laughing, leaning too close, her hand brushing mine. My heart dropped into my shoes. Nobody should have had those pictures. Nobody. Jolene and I, we weren't saints. Long shifts, long talks, the loneliness of a night job. It led to stolen kisses behind the dumpster, a few nights tangled in sheets that weren't mine to share. I told myself it was just stress, just an outlet, that I still loved Claire. But seeing those pictures, I knew excuses didn't matter. Someone had been watching. Someone knew. The next night the man came back. This time he spoke. "You'll cover my meals," he said calmly, almost polite, sliding into the booth. "Or your wife will see these." I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Is this some kind of joke? Who the hell are you?" He didn't answer. Just pulled another photo from his pocket and slid it across the counter. My breath caught in my throat. This one wasn't at the diner. It was my apartment window, curtains half drawn, me and Claire inside. Someone had been outside our home watching. That was the moment my life split in two. Before the man in the gray hoodie, and after. I tried to convince myself it was a bluff. Maybe he was just some creep with a camera, someone looking to score free meals. But when I saw the next envelope, my stomach dropped to the floor. Inside was a photo of my daughter, my baby girl, barely 3 months old, lying in her crib. The picture had been taken from outside, through the half-open window of her bedroom. I nearly collapsed behind the counter. My hands shook so bad I spilled coffee on the floor. That night, I couldn't hide my fear. Every clink of silverware sounded like a threat. Every squeak of the neon sign buzzed too loud. I burned my arm on the fryer and barely noticed. Jolene asked what was wrong, but I waved her off. How could I explain? That a stranger wasn't just blackmailing me. He was inside my life, inside my home. When the man returned, I forced myself to confront him. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, eyes shadowed under the hood. "I already told you. Meals. And respect." "Respect?" I scoffed. "You're blackmailing me and you want respect?" He leaned forward. "You don't get it. I'm not asking, I'm telling. Every shift, every meal, no slip-ups. Or your wife finds out what you've been doing behind her back. And maybe the kid ends up in the wrong picture." The blood drained from my face. "You touch my family," I started, but he raised a finger, silencing me. "Don't test me." I backed off, heart hammering. He had me cornered. I tried to keep up the act. To Claire, I was the same tired husband working long nights. To Jolene, I was just distracted, stressed from the grind. But inside, I was unraveling. Every shift, I dreaded that corner booth. He always showed, always ordered the same, always stared. I comped his meals, praying it would be enough. One night, I stepped outside for a smoke. My hands were trembling so bad I dropped the lighter twice. The parking lot was empty, except for a single cigarette burning by itself on the hood of my car. Still lit, as if someone had just been there. I spun around, searching the shadows. Nothing. Only silence and the hum of the neon sign. Back inside, the booth was empty. But on the table sat another envelope. Inside was a single note. "You can't hide what you are, and I'll keep watching." I didn't sleep that day. Every creak of the apartment made me think he was there. I checked locks 3 times before bed. Claire noticed my paranoia, but I couldn't confess. How could I? If she knew the truth about Jolene, about the affair, it would destroy us. And maybe that was his real power. Not the photos, not the threats, but the way he forced me to face what I was. A liar, a cheater, a coward, hiding behind excuses. By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled Jolene aside during a lull in the shift. "We have to stop," I told her. She frowned. "Stop what?" "You know what? Us. It's over." Her face tightened. "Why now?" I couldn't explain without unraveling everything, so I just shook my head. "It's complicated, I can't." She looked hurt, but she didn't argue. Maybe she'd seen it coming. That night, the man came in later than usual. He slid into his booth, sipped his coffee, and smirked. Trouble in paradise? I froze. How did he know? Was he watching even here, inside the diner, listening to every word? I slammed my hand on the counter. "Why me? Why are you doing this?" He leaned back, calm as ever. "Because I can. Because people like you think secrets make you untouchable. But I see them all, and I make sure you don't forget what you are." It wasn't about free food. It wasn't even about money. It was about control, about making me dance like a puppet while he pulled the strings. The final straw came on a rainy night. The diner was quiet, just one trucker nursing a burger and a nursing student buried in textbooks. The man in the gray hoodie slid into his booth same as always, but this time he didn't order. He just stared. Then he left. When I went to clear the booth, another envelope waited. Inside was a single photograph, me, standing over my daughter's crib, looking down at her. The angle was impossible. It was taken from inside the room, as if someone had been standing right behind me. My knees nearly gave out. That was when I knew it didn't matter how many locks I checked, how many cigarettes I smoked, how many lies I told myself. My family was never safe anymore. Not from him, not from the truth. Secrets rot in the dark. The more you hide them, the more power they give to anyone willing to expose them. I thought my biggest fear was losing my marriage, but the real danger was the weakness inside me, the choices I made that opened the door for someone else to control my life. I've been working the night shift at St. Augustine Medical Center on Elmwood Drive in Portland for over 3 years. Most people would call it a dead-end job, but for me, it was a lifeline. Between paying off student loans and helping my younger sister, who was still recovering from a car accident, I couldn't afford to be picky. I'd never thought of myself as particularly brave or daring. Cautious, maybe, but practical. I knew the hospital inside and out. The flicker of a faulty light in Wing C, the back door that stuck in the rain, the way the old elevator groaned if you pressed the wrong button. I'd worked enough night shifts to know the rhythms of emptiness, the low hum of the fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic that never quite went away, the echo of my own footsteps in the hallways. On most nights, it was just me and the occasional janitor. But after a long week of double shifts, fatigue made the empty corridors feel more oppressive than usual. By Thursday, October 12th, 2023, I was running on autopilot. My eyes stung from staring at screens and monitors, and I was irritable, snapping at minor annoyances. That night, the rain pelted the windows with a persistent rhythm, and the air outside smelled of wet asphalt and decay. I was checking the supply room near the ER, inventory sheets, cleaning supplies, bandages, when I saw her. She was standing at the doorway, drenched, mascara streaked down her face and her hands trembling as she clutched a small bag. "Please, I need to get in," she whispered. "My husband, he's been following me. I can't go to the front desk. Please, just for a few minutes." I froze. Protocol was clear. No one could enter without registration, especially in the middle of the night. But something in her voice made me hesitate. Desperation, fear, pure, unfiltered panic. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice low. "Follow me." I led her to a supply closet nearby and locked it behind her. Moments later, the ER doors burst open, and a man stormed in, tall and broad-shouldered, eyes wild. "Where is she? I know she's here," he shouted. I raised my hands. "I haven't seen anyone come in tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He glared, stepping closer, but then stormed past me into the empty hall. My heart pounded. Once he was gone, I returned to the supply closet, and she was gone. The bag she had clutched was gone, and the only trace she'd left behind was a single cigarette butt, still faintly smoldering. I hadn't seen her light one. My mind spun. Did she leave through a hidden exit? Had she ever been here at all? That was the first time I realized night work could be more than boredom and fatigue. It could unsettle you, make you question what you'd seen and heard. I went home that morning exhausted, but the image of her wet, desperate face lingered in my mind. Something about her felt wrong. 2 days later, I was across town at a cafe, grabbing a late breakfast after another overnight shift. My body was stiff, my eyes heavy, and my mind still half in the hospital corridors. I sipped my coffee when I noticed movement across the street. It was her, the same woman, laughing, carefree, arm in arm with the same tall man who had stormed the ER. They looked happy. My stomach sank, and I felt a flush of shame mixed with anger. I had been played, manipulated into bending protocol, breaking rules I'd held sacred for years. I didn't speak to anyone about it at work. I couldn't. Part of me was embarrassed, part of me wary. But that night, walking the familiar corridors of the hospital, the sense of unease had grown into something heavier. Every hallway seemed darker, every shadow longer than it should have been. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, pacing in sync with my own. I froze, listening. They stopped when I stopped. They sped up when I did. My pulse quickened. I turned corners, checked the supply rooms, even glanced into the empty ER, but there was nothing. No one. Just me. I called the night manager to report an irregularity, but my voice sounded shaky, unsure. By the next morning, the supply closet where I had let her in was unlocked. No sign of forced entry, no belongings, just the faint smell of cigarettes. I requested a transfer immediately, but even away from the ER, the memory of those footsteps stayed with me. I'd catch myself in my apartment, certain I heard them behind me. My mind started to play tricks, twisting every small sound into a shadow of the past. I couldn't let it go. Something about that night refused to leave me alone. On my next shift, I dug into old security footage, scanning every ER incident report from the past year. One alert caught my eye. ER incident, unknown subject. Date, nearly a year prior. The description was vague. Individual seen in supply corridor, no registration. I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow these events were connected. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, the frantic way she clutched that bag. My coworkers noticed I was jumpy, distracted. "You need a break, man," my colleague Jeff said, tossing me a donut. "You're scaring yourself." But I knew what I'd seen, or at least what I thought I'd seen. The problem was, I couldn't prove it. The nights grew worse. Every time I patrolled the ER alone, the footsteps returned. Sometimes they were soft, sometimes heavy, always following. I checked cameras, reran logs, even sat in the empty supply closet, waiting. Nothing appeared, yet the feeling persisted, like someone was always just out of sight. I started carrying pepper spray and a flashlight. I stopped taking shortcuts through hallways, started patrolling in pairs whenever I could. Still, the anxiety followed me home. I would wake in the middle of the night convinced I heard someone pacing outside my apartment door. I realized the danger wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Someone, or something, was using fear as a weapon. And the more I tried to rationalize it, the more I felt trapped. Finally, I requested a permanent transfer to a day shift at a smaller clinic. It wasn't ideal, but I needed distance, both from the hospital and my own spiraling paranoia. The footsteps didn't vanish entirely. They were in my head now, memories echoing in my mind whenever I felt alone or unsafe. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't about ghostly figures or supernatural games. It was about trust, vigilance, and boundaries. I had bent rules out of compassion or guilt, and the consequences reminded me how easily our judgment can be clouded when we act against our better instincts. Even now, years later, when the lights flicker too long or a shadow moves just slightly differently, I remember that night. I remember that woman, the man, the footsteps, and the importance of holding fast to my intuition. Sometimes the scariest threats aren't supernatural. They're the choices we make when we ignore our instincts. Compassion without caution, trust without verification, bending rules for others at the expense of our own safety. These can put us in danger far more than any ghost or prank. The world can be cruel, and manipulation can wear the face of desperation. But staying vigilant, trusting our judgment, and protecting our boundaries is how we survive, even when fear lingers long after the danger seems gone. Leaving my hometown in northern Wisconsin wasn't easy, especially leaving behind Mr. Whiskers, my scrappy old tabby who had been my only company through college and the early years of my career. But I was determined. Riverside Community Hospital in Madison had offered me my first full-time night nurse position, and at 26, it felt like a fresh start. Madison was bigger than I imagined. Streetlights blurred against the humid summer haze as I navigated downtown, dragging my luggage up the third-floor apartment stairs. By the time I unpacked my meager belongings, it was close to midnight. My first shift would start at 11 p.m. the next day, and yet sleep eluded me. My mind buzzed with new routines, unfamiliar names, and the nervous anticipation of working nights alone. Night shifts were different, quieter. Most of the hospital's activity happened during the day, visiting hours, rounds, doctors' chatter, but the nights had a rhythm all their own. Nurses whispered in corridors, wheels squeaked along polished floors, and the hum of monitors filled the air like a low, constant lullaby. I was used to that quiet, even found comfort in it. On my second night, I was introduced to room 512, a private wing tucked at the far end of the hospital's third floor. The staff didn't talk much about it, just a quiet warning in passing. Be careful tonight. That room has a history. I nodded politely, chalking it up to old hospital lore. The last thing I expected was to have a patient vanish under my care within hours. Mr. Hargrove was an elderly gentleman, frail but alert, admitted for observation after a minor stroke. He had a gentle smile, and when I helped him into bed, he joked, "Don't let the ghosts get me, nurse." I laughed, brushing off the comment as a quirky old man sense of humor. Little did I know he wasn't joking. By 1:30 a.m., the floor was silent. I was charting vitals at the nurse's station when the flatline beep from room 512 jolted me. My heart sank. The bed was empty. Crisp sheets lay untouched. Mr. Hargrove was gone. I froze. "Mr. Hargrove?" I whispered, stepping cautiously toward the window. And that's when I saw it, my reflection. But it wasn't mine. It tilted its head slowly, a twisted, unnatural smile spreading across its face. I stumbled backward, phone clattering to the floor, whispering, "Stay with me." Other nurses arrived minutes later. I sat rocking on the floor, insisting the patient had taken my place. Months later, after leaving Riverside Community Hospital and moving across town, I still wake at 1:45 a.m., hearing faint beeps and whispers. Some rooms are never truly empty. My third week on night shift began normally, or as normally as nights in a hospital ever go. By 11 p.m., I was making rounds, checking charts, administering medications. I kept to myself mostly, learning the rhythms of my coworkers, observing without engaging too deeply. Then there was room 512. I avoided it when possible, but that night it was my assignment. I didn't know if it was exhaustion or some instinct that guided me, but I felt a gnawing unease as I approached the room. The door looked ordinary, pale blue paint chipped near the handle, a faint scuff across the bottom, a small brass plaque with the number 512. Nothing seemed unusual until I glanced through the small window. The bed was empty again. No warning, no note, just silence. My pulse quickened. "Okay, Nina," I muttered to myself. "It's probably just a scheduling error." But my instincts screamed otherwise. I reached for the heart monitor. The flat line still blared, steady and unforgiving. And then I saw it. The reflection. My own eyes stared back at me, but the corners of the mirror shimmered unnaturally, and my reflection grinned. Not a smile of recognition, something predatory. I recoiled, tripping over the corner of the bed. "Room 512, status check," I called, voice shaking. No answer. Only the monitor beeped softly. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped inside. My hand grazed the cold metal railing of the bed, sheets still perfectly tucked, and then the whisper. "Stay." I spun around. The room was empty, yet the air felt thick. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and something coppery, like blood. My phone buzzed from the nurse station. Kara, my colleague, checking in on me. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I whispered, though my voice cracked. "Just checking vitals." I finished my shift shaking, avoiding room 512 entirely after that night. I didn't sleep much when I got home, haunted by the whispers, the reflection. And in the weeks that followed, I discovered the room's dark reputation. Patients admitted they're vanished during night shifts over the last 20 years. Always. Without a trace. Weeks passed, and despite my fear, I couldn't let go. I began discreetly asking colleagues, scouring patient records during lunch breaks, piecing together the hospital's hushed history. Each story was worse than the last. Elderly patients, young adults, even post-surgery recoveries, gone without explanation. Some were presumed dead or transferred quietly, but no documentation matched their disappearance. One night, determined to understand, I stayed after my shift. The hospital was silent, the fluorescent lights humming softly. I walked the third floor slowly, flashlight in hand. Each door I passed was empty. My stomach churned as I approached 5 and 12. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. No whispers this time. Only my heartbeat. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room felt wrong. Furniture slightly shifted, shadows where there should be none, the faint metallic scent in the air. I backed out slowly, and then, in the mirror, a handprint appeared, slowly forming on the glass, foggy and red. My reflection still grinned. I stumbled back and ran to the nurse's station. My notes were incomplete, but my hands trembled. Something about that room wasn't natural. Something waited there. I refused to return to room 512 for weeks, but night shifts demanded assignments. One particularly quiet Tuesday, I was ordered back. My heart hammered as I approached. I could feel it, like the room was alive, waiting. I stepped inside, flashlight flickering. The bed was empty, sheets crisp, the monitor flatlined. The whisper returned. "Stay with me." My knees buckled, and I barely managed to pull my phone from my pocket to call a code team. A shadow shifted in the corner. I froze. The reflection in the window moved independently again, closer, reaching toward me. I shouted, and the code team burst in. The room was empty, but the monitor had spiked briefly, almost like a heartbeat. The senior nurse pulled me aside later. "Room 512. Some of us don't even enter it. Those who vanish. Some come back months later and some don't. Just keep your distance." I never returned to that floor after that night. My resignation was immediate. I moved across town, rented a small apartment away from Riverside. I told no one about room 512 beyond a few trusted colleagues. I still wake at 1:45 a.m., my heart racing, hearing faint beeps, whispers, the sensation that someone or something is watching. Life goes on, but the hospital shadows never truly leave. Respect my fears and to know that some mysteries are better left unexplored. The moral is clear. Some doors, no matter how ordinary they seem, are not meant to be opened. Curiosity without caution can lead to consequences we may never escape. They say you get used to working nights, but I never did. My name is Mia Torres, and for a while I was a night custodian at Fairmont Community College in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The kind of job nobody dreams about, but one you cling to when bills keep piling up and options are thin. I never wanted the graveyard shift. Truth is, I've always been a morning person, but after my younger brother Lucas got into that car wreck and wound up with hospital bills longer than my arm, I couldn't be picky. Fairmont's daytime custodial slots were taken and nights paid a bit extra. So, there I was, mopping the same hallways I'd once walked as a student, back when my biggest worry was passing chemistry. Funny how life circles back. The worst wing, the one everybody avoided, was the West Science Building. The students whispered about it, the professors hurried out of there before dark, and even the other custodians found reasons not to cover that section. A girl had been murdered there years back, stabbed by some jealous ex-boyfriend in the chemistry lab. People said you could still hear her screams, or see her shadow if you caught the lights flickering just right. Me? I wasn't much for ghost stories. I believed in real problems. Overdue rent, past due notices, collection calls. Ghosts didn't scare me. Poverty did. But still, when my cart squeaked down that long tiled hallway, and the lights buzzed overhead and the air turned heavy like a storm about to break, I'll admit, I felt watched, like the walls themselves remembered what happened there. My shift always started at 10. By midnight, I was usually deep in that wing, mop in hand, telling myself to quit glancing over my shoulder. My walkie-talkie crackled sometimes, static and muffled voices, but the guards always swore it was interference. That night, the one I'll never forget, started like all the others. Cold desert air outside, humming fluorescence inside. Just me, my mop, and a silence too thick to be natural. It was around 12:40 a.m. when I heard them, footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of steps that told you someone wasn't just passing through, they were following. I spun around so fast my mop bucket nearly tipped. But the hallway was empty. Just lockers, scuffed tile, and that sickly yellow light stretching into forever. Don't be stupid, I muttered, more to myself than anything. I pushed the bucket forward, water sloshing. A few minutes later, the sound came again. This time quicker, almost matching my pace, like whoever it was wanted me to know they were there. I gripped the mop handle tight, knuckles white. "All right," I called, trying to sound tough. "Who's there?" Nothing. That's when my walkie crackled. At first it was just static, but then, clear as day, a whisper slid through. "Mia." My stomach dropped. Nobody here should have known my name. My hand shook as I pressed the button. "Who is this?" Silence. That was enough for me. I bolted down the hall, sneakers squeaking across the fresh wax. The footsteps behind me quickened too, pounding closer. My keys rattled like crazy as I fumbled with the exit. Finally, the door swung open, and I stumbled outside into the freezing night. That's when I nearly ran into Tony, the night security guard. He caught me by the shoulders, eyes wide. "Mia, what the hell's wrong?" "Somebody's in there," I gasped. "They were chasing me." Tony frowned, steadying me. "That's impossible. I've been watching the cameras. Nobody's gone in or out all night." I dragged him back inside to prove it. My bucket was tipped over, water smeared across the tile. But what froze us both were the muddy footprints trailing down the hall. Big, heavy, fresh. And then, just as suddenly, they stopped. Mid-corridor, like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. Tony didn't spook easy. He was ex-military, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut, the kind of guy you'd expect to laugh off ghost stories. But staring at those footprints, even he looked shaken. "You sure you didn't track that in?" he asked, though his voice lacked conviction. I glared at him. "Do these look like my shoes?" I lifted my sneaker, showing him the flat rubber tread. The prints were deep, ridged, like work boots. Tony rubbed the back of his neck. All right, I'll file a report. But Mia, I'm telling you, nobody's been on those cameras. I swallowed hard. Then explain this. He couldn't. Word got around quick. By the next night, 2 of the other custodians, Janet and Ruben, were waiting for me in the break room. You heard footsteps, right? Ruben asked, leaning in close. That wing's messed up. I told them years ago to shut it down. Janet nodded grimly. My cousin swears her friend saw a girl in a white sweater late one night standing at the end of the hall, but when she walked closer, the girl disappeared. I shook my head, annoyed. Ghost stories don't pay the bills. Janet gave me a look. Neither does ending up in the hospital. They both offered to cover the West Wing for me, but I knew better. Custodians who complained too much didn't last long. I couldn't risk the paycheck. So the next night, I went back. Alone. October 14th, 1 a.m. The building felt colder than usual. My breath fogged as I pushed the mop. The footsteps came again. Quicker this time. Almost playful. I spun, shouting, "Show yourself!" Nothing. Then the walkie crackled. Static. A voice low and broken. "Help me." My skin prickled. This wasn't just someone messing around. I raised the radio. "Who are you?" The reply came faint, distorted. "Chemistry. Lab." Against every ounce of good sense, I followed. Past the lockers, past the double doors, into the old chemistry wing. The air grew heavy, almost pressing down on me. And there, on the far wall, was a smear. Dark, rust-colored, like dried blood. My legs shook. I backed away, nearly tripping over my own mop bucket. Suddenly the lights flickered, plunging the hall into brief darkness. When they steadied, a figure stood at the end of the hall. Small, female, shoulders hunched. "Hello?" I whispered. She lifted her head, but where her face should have been, there was nothing. Just blur. I screamed and bolted, not stopping until I hit the fresh air outside. I didn't sleep that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faceless figure. By my next shift, I'd made a decision. I cornered Tony in the lobby. "I'm not going back in there alone," I said firmly. "Either you walk with me, or I quit." He hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but if we're doing this, we're getting answers." So we went back. Together. The West Wing was silent, almost mocking. We checked every door, every corner. Nothing. Until we reached the chemistry lab. There, taped to the wall behind a cabinet, was an old newspaper clipping. Yellowed, brittle. Headline: "Student murdered in West Wing lab." Tony read it aloud. The victim's name: Sarah Delgado. Age 19. Stabbed by her ex-boyfriend in 1997. We stood there in silence. Finally, I whispered, "She's still here." Tony didn't argue. He just folded the clipping, pocketed it, and said, "Let's get out." I never worked that wing again. Management reassigned me after Tony filed his report. They claimed the cameras had malfunctioned. But I knew better. Even now, years later, I still hear it sometimes in my head. The faint echo of footsteps following me down an empty hall. The West Wing echoes isn't just about ghosts in forgotten hallways. It's about the weight we carry when stories go unheard. Sarah Delgado became a rumor, a whisper, a warning. But she was a real girl whose life ended violently, and the silence around her death only deepened the fear. When we ignore the past, it echoes louder. Whether it's history, trauma, or people society would rather forget, silence only gives it more power. Facing it, remembering it, and giving voice to the unheard is the only way to quiet the footsteps that haunt us. My name is Maya Collins, and I've spent more than a decade working the night shift in the ER at St. Vincent's Hospital in Chicago. People think the night shift is glamorous, like we're some kind of real-life TV drama. Doctors yelling, nurses racing, life and death miracles every 5 minutes. Truth is, it's more about exhaustion. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and the ache in your bones from being awake when the rest of the world sleeps. I didn't plan on staying in Chicago forever. Back when I was younger, my dream was to move to Boston and teach nursing. I imagined myself in neat classrooms, chalk in hand, shaping the next wave of nurses instead of cleaning blood off stretchers at 3 in the morning. But life had other plans. First came the divorce. My husband packed up and moved to Phoenix, chasing some fresh start with a woman half my age. Then my father passed, leaving me with a mountain of grief and no family left to lean on except my teenage daughter, Grace. The bills didn't stop, and teaching jobs didn't exactly drop into my lap. So I stuck with the one thing I knew I could count on. Night shifts at St. Vincent's. It paid the rent. It kept food on the table. It covered Grace's braces and basketball shoes. That was enough. But if I'm honest, the hardest part of nights wasn't the chaos. It was the quiet. After midnight, once the gunshot victims had been wheeled into surgery, once the car wrecks had been stabilized, once the overdoses were either revived or lost, the halls went eerily still. The vending machines hummed, the monitors beeped, and the silence pressed down like a weight. I hated it. That's why March 2nd, 2022 is etched into me. It was the night the silence finally broke me. The clock read 1:18 a.m. when the paramedics wheeled him in, a man mid-30s, dark hair plastered with blood, arms mottled with bruises. Highway accident, one of them told me. Lost control of his car, rolled twice. He's stable, though. Stable was a blessing in our world, but something about him was wrong. I checked his vitals, pulse steady, blood pressure decent, oxygen good. He should have been screaming in pain. Instead, he just stared at me. Wide eyes, lips trembling like he wanted to say something but couldn't. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" I asked softly. Nothing. Just that unblinking stare. I chalked it up to shock. Trauma patients sometimes shut down completely, but the way his eyes followed me, the way they seemed to know me, it unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. Every time I walked past his room, there he was, watching. Valerie, another nurse, noticed me shivering. "You okay, Collins?" she teased. "He won't stop staring," I whispered. Valerie laughed. "It's 3 in the morning. Everyone looks creepy at 3 in the morning." She brushed it off, but I couldn't. I tried to shake it, told myself it was exhaustion. But when I finally sat at my station around 3:47 a.m., fighting to keep my eyes open, I heard it soft as breath. "Maya." I froze. Looked up. The silent patient's lips were moving. Valerie passed by again, chuckling. "You're hearing things. Get some coffee before you keel over." But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I tried to focus on charts, on paperwork, anything to keep me grounded. But the longer I sat there, the heavier my eyelids grew. At some point before 4:30, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, my chair wobbled as I jerked awake. That's when I noticed his bed was empty. My pulse spiked. I grabbed my flashlight, heart thundering as I checked the hallway. At the far end, beneath the dim glow of the Brexit sign, he stood barefoot, bloodied gown hanging off his frame, one arm lifted, pointing toward the morgue. I whispered to myself, "This isn't real, you're dreaming." But my feet moved anyway. Each step echoed sharp against the linoleum. "Sir?" My voice cracked. "You can't be down there, you need to..." He didn't move, just kept pointing. When I reached the morgue doors, they creaked open on their own. Cold air hit me in the face. He was gone. But one drawer was half open, like it was waiting for me. My hands trembled as I gripped the steel handle. Part of me screamed to turn back, to call security, to wake Valerie, anyone. But some deeper instinct told me I had to look. The drawer slid out with a metallic groan, and there it was. Me. My own body lay inside, pale, lips bluish, eyes closed. Navy scrubs, even the faint bleach stain on my sleeve. Around my wrist, a fresh hospital bracelet, Maya Collins, DOA, March 2nd, 2022. I staggered back, slamming into the wall. My chest burned, like my lungs couldn't catch air. I clawed at my pulse, still there, pounding, but faint. The morgue lights flickered overhead, plunging me in and out of shadow. And then, close enough that I felt the breath against my ear, his voice finally came. "It's time." I spun. No one there. Just the drawer. Just me. I don't remember leaving the morgue. One moment I was staring at my own face, the next I was slumped in the ER break room, Valerie shaking my shoulder. "Jesus, Collins, you okay? You look like hell." I wanted to tell her everything, but my throat locked. I just nodded weakly, grabbed my coat, and left as soon as my shift ended. I kept telling myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination brought on by too many years of caffeine and night shifts. But when I got home, Grace looked up from the kitchen table and frowned. "Mom, you're ice cold." Her words cut deeper than they should have. Because when I touched my skin, it really was cold. Too cold. That night, when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed of the morgue again. The drawer, my name, my body, and standing over me, the silent patient, waiting. Morning never came. The silent patient is more than a ghost story. It's a reminder of how fragile life is when we live only for survival. Maya spent years sacrificing herself to pay bills, to endure, to just make it till morning. But in ignoring her own well-being, she missed the signs that life was slipping away piece by piece. Life isn't just about surviving each night, it's about truly living each day. Because if we only ever fight to make it till morning, we may wake up too late to realize the mornings have already run out. My name's Liam Mercer, and I never planned on working at a gas station. For most of my 20s, I had what I thought was a steady future. An office job in Denver, a small apartment, a girlfriend who tolerated my late hours. But by 2022, it had all unraveled. The company downsized, I got laid off, and within 6 months my relationship collapsed under the weight of bills and uncertainty. When you're scrambling to rebuild, you learn to grab what's available, not what you want. That's how I ended up at a lonely roadside gas station on Route 82 near Ashwood, Colorado, pulling the graveyard shift. The pay was lousy, but it was steady. It covered rent on my small studio and gave me time to take night classes in accounting, my supposed ticket out. I'm a cautious person by nature. Always have been. I double-check locks, make lists, triple-check them. My sister used to call me paranoid. I called it prepared. Working nights alone only sharpened those habits. Every shift I made sure the registers balanced, the doors clicked shut, and the pumps ran smooth. It gave me a sense of control, like maybe life wasn't spiraling as much as it felt. Most nights were dead quiet. A car or two around midnight, maybe a trucker grabbing coffee. Then silence. Just the hum of the cooler, the squeak of the heater, and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. I told myself the quiet was good, peaceful. But the truth was, quiet gave my thoughts room to run, and they usually ran places I didn't want. That's why I kept a thermos of coffee by the register. It wasn't just about staying awake. It was about holding on to something warm, something solid, something that kept me grounded. Still, nothing in my cautious little routines prepared me for the night of March 16th, 2024. That was the night I learned there are some things you can't plan for, some things you can't lock out, no matter how many times you check the doors. It started around 3:02 a.m., the loneliest time of night, when even the road feels abandoned. I stood at the front window, sipping coffee, watching the pumps glow faintly under the canopy. Snow covered the lot, untouched. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. That's when I saw it. At first it looked like condensation, like the kind you'd expect on a cold night. A small fog patch forming on the glass right in front of me, as if someone outside was breathing against it. I leaned closer, frowning. There was nobody out there. I wiped the window with my sleeve, but the fog thickened again, spreading wider. My stomach tightened. By 3:07, faint outlines appeared, Handprints, dozens of them pressed against the glass. Fingers splayed, palms flat, overlapping like a crowd was leaning in from the darkness. I whispered to myself, "No way, no way." I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, my breath clouding in the cold. I swung the beam across the lot. Nothing. No cars, no footprints in the snow, not even stray animal tracks. The pumps hummed steady, indifferent. When I went back inside, my chest sank. The handprints were still there, larger now, multiplying. I locked the doors fast, checked them twice. Then I picked up the phone to call 911. Static filled the line. Then, soft, faint, like a breath carried through static, I heard whispering. My name. Liam. The coffee in my stomach curdled. I dropped the receiver, heart pounding. My eyes dragged back to the window, and that's when I saw it. All the larger prints had faded like they'd pulled back. Only one remained. Small, delicate. A child's hand, trembling against the glass. My throat closed. I wanted to back away, to run, but some pull, curiosity, dread, I don't know, kept me rooted. Against every instinct screaming otherwise, I raised my hand and pressed it to the glass, lining my palm with that small print. Warmth surged into me. Not the icy sting of the night air, but real human warmth. For one fragile second, it felt almost comforting, like a child clutching your hand in a crowd. My breath caught in my throat. Then the warmth snapped away. Cold slammed back in. And that's when I saw it. A shadow flickering behind me, across the rows of shelves. I spun around, flashlight beam jerking wildly. Nothing. Just the aisles of chips, the cooler doors, the hum of fluorescent lights. But I swear, in that half second, someone had been standing there, watching. I muttered out loud, just to anchor myself. "You're tired. That's all. Just tired." But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. When my manager showed up at 7:30 a.m., I was still sitting behind the counter, pale as the snow outside. She frowned immediately. "Why'd you leave the doors unlocked all night, Mercer?" I blinked. "I locked them. I checked them twice. They were open when I got here." My stomach dropped. I didn't argue. What could I say? Later that week, the police came by, casual but curious. An older officer leaned against the counter, sipping gas station coffee, and asked, "You been here long?" "Couple months," I said. "You ever hear what happened to this place back in '99? I shook my head. He glanced at the window, the same one where the prints had appeared. His voice lowered. "Fire started around 3 in the morning. Man and his little girl were trapped inside. Couldn't get out. Place burned down. They rebuilt the station over the ashes." My coffee went cold in my hand. He studied me a second, maybe catching the look on my face. Then he just nodded like he'd said enough and left. That night, when I walked past the front window, I thought I saw it again, a small handprint fading just as I blinked. I finished out the month at the station, but I never worked another graveyard shift. Not there, not anywhere. When I drive past Route 82 now, I don't look too long. I keep my eyes on the road, hands gripping the wheel. But sometimes, when snow dusts the glass of passing stations, I swear I see faint handprints forming like they're calling me back. I don't answer. Some nights, though, when the house is too quiet, when the heater hums just like those fluorescents, I feel that warmth again. Small, trembling, pressing into my palm. And I wonder if maybe it wasn't trying to scare me at all. Maybe it was trying to remind me that even in the loneliest hours, we're never really alone. Liam's story reminds us that the past lingers in ways we don't always see. The burned-out station, the whispers, the handprints, all were echoes of lives cut short, asking not for fear, but for acknowledgement. We can't lock out the past, but we can choose how we face it. Ignoring history, whether personal or collective, only gives it power in the dark. But if we meet it with recognition, even trembling, we might find not just terror, but traces of connection, of humanity, left behind. The fog always rolled in heavy in October, swallowing the coastline of Driftwood Bay until the lighthouse beam looked like a flashlight in soup. That night, I sat beside my dad, Robert, at the fire pit outside our cabin. Most of the Halloween party guests had already left, their laughter trailing down the gravel driveway. The air smelled like burnt pumpkins and cider, the waves crashing faint in the distance. I pulled my hoodie tight around my shoulders and sketched half distractedly in the corner of my notebook, shapes of the flames, a rough outline of the old driftwood logs stacked behind us. Dad leaned back in his chair, cider steaming in his hand, eyes hazy the way they got when he wandered into memory. "You ever wonder," he said, staring at the sparks floating up, "what kind of people shape us the most?" I shrugged. "Teachers, I guess, or friends." He chuckled. "For me, it was someone I probably should have stayed away from. A woman named Elena Rivers back in Santa Cruz, early 80s. His tone was different, careful, almost rehearsed. I closed my notebook, sensing the weight behind the name. The fog pressed closer around us, and for a moment, I felt like the night was waiting for his story as much as I was. Dad painted Santa Cruz like a postcard. Sunlit beaches, boardwalk rides, the salt-stained houses of surfers stacked along the coast. He was 19 then, skinny and broke, working at a marina shop. That's where he first saw her, Elena. She had this platinum blonde hair, he said, waving a hand as if he could conjure her in the fog. Not dyed trashy blonde. It looked like it belonged to her. She was strong, windsurfer strong. You could see it in her arms the way she moved. He told me he signed up for a beginner windsurfing class just to be near her. I must have swallowed half the ocean those first weeks, but every time I fell she'd laugh, pull me up, and make it feel like drowning was fun. I pictured her like a storm, bright, electric, impossible to ignore. Dad's eyes softened when he spoke about her, but I noticed his jaw tightened too, like the memory carried splinters. At first, their relationship was sunny. Bonfires with her surfer friends, long afternoons tangled in salt-stiff blankets, late-night drives with the radio blasting. But cracks showed quick. Elena thrived on attention. She had a roommate she was too close with, kept men hanging around who looked at her like moths circling flame. She lied like it was a game, Dad said, voice low. Not big lies, just... She'd tell me she was home studying, and later I'd hear she'd been out at a party. When I'd call her out, she'd laugh, kiss me, make me feel stupid for even asking. I shifted in my chair, the fire popping between us. "So why stay?" His eyes met mine, sharp. "Because sometimes charm feels like gravity. You don't realize you're circling something dangerous until it's too late." Dad admitted the thrill kept him there longer than he should have been. Elena made ordinary days feel cinematic. She'd burst into his apartment at midnight, dragging him to the beach just to watch waves slam the rocks. She'd dance barefoot in parking lots, toss his sketchbooks open and scrawl her name in the margins. But unease grew. She picked fights for sport. She'd flirt openly with her roommate at bars, watch Dad's face burn, then smirk like she'd won a bet. Once she convinced him she'd lost her wallet, only for him to find it later in her bag. Cash missing. But she laughed, insisting it was a test. "Every time I thought about leaving," he said, staring into the fire, "she'd pull me back with some grand gesture. It felt like she could twist reality to suit her mood." I asked if he was scared of her. "Not then," he admitted. "I thought I was scared of losing her. That's the dangerous part. You confuse fear with love." Eventually, it ended with one final fight. He said she showed up at the marina, shouting, accusing him of flirting with customers. He called her a liar in front of everyone. Her face hardened, like a mask snapping into place. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just smiled, slow and cold, and walked away. "That was the last time I saw her," Dad said, voice flat. Years rolled on. Dad left California, met my mom in Ohio, settled into a steadier life. But Elena never left the edges of his mind. "In '95, I was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand," he said. Flipped open the paper, and there she was, her mugshot. I leaned forward. For what? His face tightened. Murder. 3 older women, strangled. She'd stolen their credit cards, lived in hotels, bought clothes, jewelry. They called her a drifter, a con artist who escalated. The fire snapped between us. I felt my stomach drop, picturing the same platinum-haired woman who once scrawled in his sketchbook now gripping the throats of strangers. It made sense, Dad continued, his voice rough. All the lies, the manipulation, the way she fed on chaos. I just never thought she'd take it that far. I sat in silence, trying to reconcile the image of her laughing at bonfires with the headline Dad described. Did you love her? I finally asked. He didn't answer right away. Part of me did, or maybe I loved the way she made me feel. But love built on fear and lies isn't real. It's poison. The fog thickened as his story ended. I stared into the fire, trying to process the weight of it. Dad leaned back, drained, as though speaking Elena's name after all these years had cost him something. You know why I told you this tonight, he asked. Because you don't want me to fall for someone like that, I guessed. He nodded. Charm isn't the same as goodness. Sometimes the people who shine brightest carry the darkest shadows. I thought about the girls at school, the friends I trusted, even myself. How easy it would be to mistake excitement for safety, attention for affection. The fire burned low and the night pressed in. I opened my notebook again, sketching a faceless figure with hair like silver flames standing in the fog. Charisma can blind us, and the thrill of someone's unpredictability can feel intoxicating. But charm without honesty is a warning, not a gift. Danger often hides behind beauty and excitement, and that trust, once given blindly, can cost far more than a broken heart. It can risk our very safety. True love isn't about fear, control, or spectacle. It's about respect, honesty, and peace. I never expected my first week at Riverside Community Hospital to feel like stepping into another world. Madison, Wisconsin, was a far cry from the small town I'd left behind, and moving across the state meant leaving my elderly cat, Mr. Whiskers, with my parents. It was worth it, though. I had landed my dream job as a night nurse, and even though night shifts could be lonely, I liked the quiet rhythm of empty halls, the steady hum of fluorescent lights, and the occasional distant beep of a heart monitor. The hospital had a reputation among the staff for being old school, with peeling paint in the hallways, stairwells that creaked underfoot, and fluorescent lights that flickered when no one was looking. Everyone warned me about certain wings, room 512 in particular. Staff avoided it quietly, muttering about strange noises or patients who seemed different. I shrugged it off as nursing folklore. Hospitals, after all, were full of rumors and stress. I had a job to do. It was a Tuesday, July 9th, 2024, and I had just settled into the rhythm of charting vitals. The night was unusually warm for July, and the windows along Harrison Avenue rattled slightly in the wind. My assignment included room 512, a private wing on the 3rd floor, which I noticed was eerily quiet even by night standards. Mr. Hargrove, an elderly man recovering from congestive heart failure, had been admitted just hours earlier. The usual pleasantries had been exchanged. "How are you feeling tonight?" I asked, adjusting his oxygen mask. "Better, thanks, nurse," he replied, giving a small, tired smile. I left him for a few minutes to check on the other patients, my clipboard in hand. The hallways were deserted, and the echo of my shoes against the linoleum seemed louder than usual. That's when I noticed the heart monitor in room 512 flatlining. My heart lurched. I rushed in, expecting a malfunction, only to find the bed empty. Sheets were neatly tucked in, untouched, as if no one had ever slept there. "Mr. Hargrove?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. No response. I checked the adjoining closets and bathroom. Nothing. Panic edged my thoughts. I stepped toward the window to peer outside, searching for any sign of him. Perhaps he had wandered down the fire escape. That's when I saw it. My reflection, or what should have been my reflection, The image of me in the glass moved differently than I did. Its head tilted slowly, unnaturally, and a twisted smile spread across its face. My knees buckled, and I fell backward, hitting the floor hard. A faint whisper grazed my ear. "Stay with me." I scrambled for my flashlight and phone, my hands shaking. I called the nurse's station frantically. By the time 2 colleagues arrived, I was sitting on the floor rocking gently, insisting that Mr. Hargrove had taken my place. They exchanged worried glances, whispering to each other before escorting me to a break room to calm down. Later, when I returned to the room with a senior nurse, it appeared perfectly normal, just as if nothing had happened. I tried to rationalize it: stress, lack of sleep, the isolation of night shifts. But the unease never left me. The next few nights I couldn't stop thinking about room 512. I avoided it when possible, assigning vitals checks to my colleagues. Yet every time I walked past, I felt a presence, like someone, or something, was watching me. The hospital was quiet, almost too quiet, and even the usual hum of equipment seemed muffled. One night I stayed late to finish charting. The clock read 1:42 a.m., and I hesitated before entering room 512. My heart pounded as if anticipating something I couldn't define. I stepped inside, scanning the room. The bed was made, the heart monitor steady. Nothing seemed out of place. But then, the monitor beeped erratically for a split second, and I froze. A faint smell of antiseptic, mixed with something acrid, almost like smoke, filled the air. My reflection appeared in the window again, but this time, it lingered longer than I did. Its lips moved before mine, whispering something inaudible. Goosebumps rose along my arms. I called out, "Hello, Mr. Hargrove, anyone?" My voice sounded fragile, swallowed by the emptiness. Later, I found myself talking with a fellow nurse, Mara, who had been at Riverside for over a decade. "Room 512, she said quietly. "Don't go there at night. Nobody goes there at night. Patients have disappeared before. Just be careful." "Disappeared?" I asked, incredulous. Mara nodded. "They vanish without a trace. Staff check cameras, do rounds, nothing. It's always during night shifts. Some say the room feeds on fear." She laughed nervously, but her eyes didn't smile. I tried to shake it off as superstition. Hospitals are full of stress-induced hallucinations, overworked minds seeing patterns where there aren't any. Still, the dread that lodged in my chest every time I thought of room 5-12 was real. A week later, I returned to room 5-12 reluctantly. Mr. Hargrove had been reassigned to another wing, and the room sat empty. I ran my fingers along the sheets, remembering the emptiness that had unnerved me before. Then I noticed something unusual, a faint imprint on the mattress, like a person had just risen from it. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. My flashlight flickered. "Hello?" I shouted. No answer. The room felt colder than it should have, and the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch unnaturally. I approached the window and caught my reflection again, but it wasn't me. It grinned, slowly, maliciously, mouthing words I couldn't understand. Then I heard the whisper, clearer this time. "Stay." My knees buckled, and I fell to the floor. I crawled to the door, pulling it open, and fled into the hallway, gasping for breath. After that night, I refused to work in room 512. I requested reassignment, and my supervisor reluctantly agreed. I kept hearing stories from other nurses, patients disappearing, rooms left untouched, shadows that moved differently than the light. Riverside Community Hospital was old, but this room, something else lived there. Months later, I moved into a small apartment across town, trying to put Riverside behind me. But the memories stayed. Every night at 1:45 a.m., I woke suddenly, heart pounding, hearing faint beeps and whispers. I would see shadows stretching across the walls, shadows that moved independently of the light. Even therapy and counseling couldn't erase the images. My reflection in the window, grinning at me with those impossible eyes. I dreamt of the corridors, the flickering lights, and the empty bed where Mr. Hargrove had vanished. The fear had embedded itself in me, and no amount of rational thinking could shake it. Sometimes I felt the presence in my apartment, the subtle brushing against my shoulder, the faint smell of antiseptic that wasn't mine. The room was empty, yet never truly empty. I've come to accept that some experiences leave scars not on the body but on the mind. I no longer work nights and I've avoided hospitals when possible. Yet I've learned something valuable. Fear is real, and sometimes it comes from places you cannot see or touch. Room 512 taught me that not every absence is benign, and not every shadow can be ignored. I've adapted, sleeping with a nightlight, keeping my apartment well lit, and avoiding reflections late at night. It's a small comfort, but it keeps me grounded. Some doors, some rooms, should never be opened, and some histories, no matter how skeptical we are, deserve respect. Even now, at 1:45 a.m., when the world is quiet, I am reminded that not all rooms are empty, and some presences linger long after you've left. Some dangers are invisible, lurking not in the open, but in the places we ignore. Respect boundaries, trust your instincts, and honor the experiences of those who came before you. Fear is not always irrational. Sometimes it's a signal, a reminder that certain doors once opened may never fully close, and some presences never truly leave.